Have you ever imagined swimming over mountains? Not in a movie or a dream, but for real? Well, you can actually do it. And all you need to do is head to China. Of course, in the modern world, this is only possible thanks to systems related to dams and hydroelectric power stations. China accounts for about a third of the world's hydroelectric power. Just think about it. China generates 391 gigawatts of the 1,360 gigawatts the world produces. And it's no surprise because the country has a huge number of hydropower plants. And some of them are real record breakers. There's the Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest hydropower plant on our planet, with an installed capacity of 22.5 gigawatts, massive size, and annual generation. There's also the Baihatan Dam in China, which, although it's smaller than the Three Gorges Dam, still takes second place in the list of the world's largest hydropower plants. And in fact, the top 5 positions in this ranking are all taken by Chinese structures. So in this country, they managed to make ships literally float over mountains. And today, you'll find out how China pulled this off. Shiplift. Fiction is becoming a reality right here. Not far from the Gaopatan Dam, located in China's Guizhou province, a watercraft approaches a tall building along a canal, then sails inside. The building, of course, turns out to be quite special. Inside, there's a lifting cable, 2 rows of drums for it, plus gearboxes on both sides. So basically, it's a lift. For someone living in a regular high-rise, it might seem odd and way too slow. That huge space inside, all those moving parts. But according to the designers, it's exactly because of all this that the lift can raise or lower a 500-ton ship in about 10 minutes. In other words, in just a short time, a standard passenger vessel can practically soar above its original location. The maximum weight the enormous lift can handle is up to 1,800 tons. A ship like that would take longer to lift, but honestly, nobody would probably care since any vessel would be lifted to an astounding height of 236 feet, which can change depending on the river current, reaching as high as 259 feet. You can imagine, right? To rise to the height of about a 26-story building on a ship? It's no wonder that some people call the system at the Gaopatan an impressive feat of engineering, or even an engineering marvel. Of course, you could argue with such grand words, because ship lifts have been around all over the world for quite some time, but you've probably noticed that there's not just one lift in the system, there are 3 of them. After the first lift comes the second. It raises the ship by 417 feet. The mechanism works the same way. The vessel enters, then waits for the system to start, and then it rises. Altogether, the water transport entering the Gaopatan Dam lift system raised by 653 feet. It's literally like, well, let's just say comparisons are inevitable here. For example, the height that the ships reach is about the same as a 66-story building. If the Great Pyramid of Giza were standing nearby, you could easily see it from above. The height of this Egyptian wonder is 456 feet, and as for the Statue of Liberty, let's not even mention it, it's only 305 feet tall. After overcoming 2 lifts, you need to somehow go down to get to the water behind the dam. To do this, the Chinese system has one more lift. It's located at the very end of the mountain navigation route and lowers you by a maximum of 154 feet. This height, once again, depends on the water level. By the way, the system might seem pretty bad in terms of throughput. The vessel, even though it rises relatively quickly, is just one vessel. It's nothing like free movement on the river where several boats can float at once, just keeping a safe distance from each other. Yeah, she'll never achieve a comparable throughput with this lift system, but only to an extent because there could be a whole line of ships along the way to the lifts. As soon as one vehicle passes the first lift, another can be raised right after. It's not perfect, but the engineers did everything they could to speed up movement along this route. Aqueduct. 3 lifts that make playing with height seem like something really simple? This is certainly an amazing achievement of Chinese engineering. However, there's a distance between the lifts that you need to somehow cross. Usually, this isn't something people put much effort into. Traditionally, locks are used for moving between different heights, so there's no need to go over mountains. Even multi-stage transitions from one level to another are done without any serious additional work. In other words, you just install a few locks and the ship gradually goes up or down, first to one height, then to another, and so on. But here they need to move ships between mountains, and the river didn't have a lift system in place from the start, so they had to do something extra. Besides building the 3 elevators, they had to create a path between them. In the end, the main part of the path between the 2 lifts and the mountain is an open aqueduct. It's not that building such routes are rare, They were built in ancient times, so people managed to do it even without the complex modern technology. But here they had to somehow integrate the aqueduct into the mountainous terrain and the whole lift system, so there were a lot more challenges. But the Chinese, of course, pulled it off. Just like that, they were able to successfully create the second part of the route, which runs through the mountain. No need to wonder how China managed to do this. The People's Republic of China is pretty much an expert at building tunnels with massive tunnel boring machines, so everything was done just the way it was supposed to be. As a result, the country has a waterway that stretches 1.4 miles between the mountains and within the mountain. Yeah, the whole system ended up costing quite a bit, around $777.5 million. Still, ships can now sail through one of the hardest areas out there. With traditional systems, every single ship would have had a much rougher time making it through. Gupatan Dam. You've probably already figured out that the system with the aqueduct and lifts was built just because the Gupatan Dam was put up in this area. Looking at this dam, which was under construction from 2003 to 2009, you can immediately notice its main feature. It's an arch dam. Right off the bat, you can compare it to another Chinese dam, Baihatan, which was built not too long ago. The shape's pretty much identical and the location is nearly the same, but size-wise, today's star doesn't quite measure up. This dam, featuring a one-of-a-kind ship lift system, stands 760 feet high and stretches 1,830 feet long, whereas Baihatan reaches a sky-high 950 feet and spans an incredible 2,330 feet. So the power of the hydroelectric stations also varies, and quite dramatically. The Baihatan hydroelectric dam has a total capacity on some kind of otherworldly level, 16,000 megawatts, whereas Gupatan isn't up to par. Its capacity is just 3,000 megawatts. The yearly output is also on a completely different level. Baihatan gives off 60,240 kilowatt hours of energy, and Gupatan doesn't even make it to 10,000 kilowatt hours. So the Gupatan Dam and hydroelectric power station aren't anything special, except of course for the shipping system that lets you float over the mountains. So the question arises, why were such huge investments of effort, time, and money necessary if even the main object isn't exactly grand? Reasons for building. First, let's take a look at where the dam and its ship lift system are located. It's such a narrow, tricky place for ships that we dismiss the idea of using a locked system right away. Also, it's important to note that China did pretty well with the construction of the Gupatan Dam. Any dam blocks the river, causing water to build up on one side, which raises the water level. On the other side, where the water flow is limited, the level goes down. Sometimes the difference in the water levels before and after the dam is not too noticeable, but in the case of the Gupatan hydroelectric station, the drop was so severe that they had to give up even on this system with a single lift. It would have been too time-consuming and risky to raise the ships to such a height. So was it really necessary to build a dam and a hydroelectric power station there, where it's hard to make a less labor-intensive and cheaper project? Well, let's take a look at Guizhou province. That's where the Wu River is, with a dam and a system that includes 3 lifts. The province is located on the Yunnan-Guizhou Plateau, and its average elevation is about 3,600 feet. The topography can generally be divided into 3 main types: mountain plateaus, hills, and valleys. However, 92.5% of the area is made up of mountainous, hilly terrain that's unsuitable for regular transportation infrastructure, and that's where a lot of rivers run. In general, no matter how you look at it, the finished dam will become a problem for water transport, which often needs to be solved with unconventional methods like a triple lift system. Maybe they shouldn't have built a dam here at all. But wait, that's not actually the right thing to say. Other power sources in the region are much weaker than hydroelectric ones. The hydropower potential here is 18,745 million kilowatts, which ranks 6th in China. So the Guizhou government is really trying to make the most of what nature provides. As a result, on the Wu River alone, there are 8 hydroelectric power plants with a total capacity of 8,500 megawatts. One of them is Gupatan, because the authorities just couldn't ignore the promising hydroelectric potential of the area. By the way, the drive to make the most of all the water resources in Guizhou is largely tied to a national program in which China plans to significantly shift its energy sector toward green sources by 2030. By 2035, renewable energy is expected to account for a significant share of the country's total energy, and clearly the simplest and most effective solution for Guizhou with its mountains and rivers will be to maximize the use of hydroelectric resources. Actually, there are a lot of rivers in Gießau, so maybe it would have been better to send ships on different routes so they wouldn't get in the way of the hydropower plants. We'll get into that now. The Wu River is a tributary of the Yangtze, which is the longest and most water-rich river in Eurasia, third in the world by fullness of water and fourth by length. Plus, it's the longest river that flows through one country. It covers a fifth of all China's land area, and around a third of the population lives along it, with the Yangtze Delta contributing up to 20% of China's GDP. So naturally, many transport routes run along this river, not just passenger ones, but freight as well. Let's just say any region in China that isn't connected to the Yangtze would love to be a part of this great Chinese transport artery. In Gießau, this is possible because, as we've mentioned, the Wu River is one of its tributaries. So the region needed both energy development and connections to the water transport routes. So we have the Gupatan hydropower plant with its lift system, capable of handling 2,928 million tons of cargo annually. You could argue that it's always possible to transport goods using, say, semi-trailers or freight trains, but both of those options are a less efficient alternative. For example, a standard-sized truck can carry about 22 to 25 tons, so let's go with an average of 23 tons. Also, let's remember that the Gupatan Dam lift can raise a vessel weighing 500 tons. But as we've said, that's not the limit. In the end, one barge replaces several dozen trucks. Now let's look at the roads in the mountainous Gießau region. It's either difficult or downright impossible to build a wide highway that can handle a lot of trucks along with regular cars. And if they do send trucks along these narrow mountain roads and bridges, it's slow and risky. Basically, who needs it when there's water transport? Not to mention that barges and other cargo vessels are much more fuel efficient. Rail transport's somewhat better, but it's still hard to lay down tracks, and in terms of efficiency, the trains still lose out to ships. So despite all the problems with these ship lifts, the region got the best possible solution for a huge amount of money, and we, for our part, got a breathtaking sight and discovered that sailing on a ship over the mountains is more than doable. A serious rival. Well, ships that can handle 1,800 tons, that's a serious claim to a record. If you don't know about another lift, guess which dam I'm talking about? Of course, China's giant record holder, the Three Gorges Dam. Its lift can raise about 3,000 tons. That's, well, a whole lot. Of course, grand opportunities came with grand sizes. The lift has a pool that's about 400 feet long and roughly 60 feet wide. The amount of water it holds is roughly equal to 4 Olympic swimming pools. In total, there's enough space for practically any vessel with the stated maximum weight. This elevator lifts such a heavy load to a height of 371 feet above the ground. It's not exactly a world record considering the multi-lift systems we saw today. The speed's slower too. The Three Gorges Dam lift takes 40 minutes to do this, but keep in mind this is a single elevator lifting an enormous weight to quite a height. In short, you can't underestimate the brilliance of Chinese engineers. Besides, they've done a lot to ensure safety. There are 4 symmetrically arranged sets of drive mechanisms with gears and supports which rigidly hold the vessel's chamber at 4 points. This helps eliminate the effects caused by water tilting or swaying inside the chamber, plus it reduces the risk of chamber overturning. The creators also made sure the system is safe even during emergencies like earthquakes. There are buffer and damping mechanisms in the ship lift chamber that absorb shocks and vibrations. One of the people involved in the construction says that such protection, in case of earthquakes, transmits the seismic forces to the columns, which helps prevent the chamber from falling and other serious accidents. After the lift was up and running, the positive results were already noticeable. The Three Gorges Navigation Company reported that the dam's throughput in the first half of 2023 was 84.15 million tons, a 9.32% increase compared to the previous year, marking a new historical high. Three Gorges Dam locks. As you can imagine, before the lift was built at the Three Gorges Dam, ships still passed through the dam, and they did it using another engineering marvel, a multi-stage lock system. There are 2 sets of navigation locks next to the dam, each consisting of 5 stages, and it takes about 4 hours to pass through them. By the way, this is the main reason why China is thinking about building a lift system. 40 minutes versus 4 hours to get to the top. This is a huge difference that can seriously impact the economy of both individual companies and the entire country. After all, the Yangtze is the main waterway, and it can't really be any other way. The transit consists of a 5-stage 2-lane lock system. Each stage is 920 feet long, 115 feet wide, 16 feet deep, and the maximum weight of a vessel is 10,000 tons. You could say that nearly any cargo or passenger vehicle that can travel along rivers will fit through there. How much do the locks help China's economy? Even with a 4-hour passage through all the stages in 2022, the cargo turnover reached 159.65 million tons, and its annual growth generally follows China's steady economic development. By the way, it was originally expected that the throughput capacity would reach a maximum of 100 million tons per year. They underestimated it, and that's good because maybe that's the reason why a gigantic lift appeared on the dam. Scottish miracle. Now let's head to Scotland. In 2002, they created a solution to connect the canals, the Falkirk Wheel. At first, they used a system of 11 gates, but it got dismantled. After that, the Forth and Clyde and Union canals were left without any connection for almost 70 years. Then in 2002, this unusual system appeared. From the very start, a unique design for the Falkirk Wheel was proposed, a Ferris wheel with 4 gondolas. In general, this idea was well received, but it turned out to be not exactly what British Waterways was looking for. The final design was inspired by a Celtic axe, a ship's propeller, and a whale's ribcage. The resulting structure is 115 feet tall and using 2 gondolas holds 300 tons of water, which means the wheel moves 600 tons of cargo with each lift. The most interesting thing is that the gondolas are in balance because the boats displace their own weight in water. What does this mean? It takes surprisingly little energy to move them. As claimed, it takes the same amount as boiling 8 kettles of water. It should be said that this is the only structure like this in the world. So it's not just China that knows how to create amazing objects that let vessels move in such an unusual way.